Destiny. What does it take to shape one's own destiny? A bold vision, foresight, a strong sense of purpose to secure the future of generations to come. Singapore, as we know it today, is not a matter of fate or chance, but the result of foresight, gumption, and courage. The 60s and 70s were tumultuous times. Separation from Malaysia, the sterling devaluation, the Bretton Woods system collapse, hikes in oil prices. Our founding leaders navigated these episodes and were convicted that our reserves needed to be safeguarded at all costs. Singapore's first Minister of Finance, Dr. Goh Keng Swee, envisioned that for Singapore to master her own destiny, she had to be financially secure. A bold, radical solution for the long term was needed. What he came up with was revolutionary: the world's first non-commodity-based sovereign wealth fund, GIC. Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, the founding chairman, set out a clear investment objective: to invest the reserves for the long term. Under his leadership, he shaped GIC's core values of integrity, meritocracy, and boldness of vision. His imprint on GIC's development would be indelible. From Yong Peng Hao, its first managing director, to Dr. Richard Hu, who succeeded him, and the many leaders after, GIC was entrusted to do the utmost for the country by investing Singapore's reserves with a long-term perspective for better returns, and was to do so while conducting itself in a manner beyond reproach, distinguished by its professionalism and excellence. GIC diversified its portfolio, ensuring the resilience of its returns, developed investment expertise across asset classes and strategies, from public equities and bonds to private equity, real estate, infrastructure, and technology. Over time, GIC increased the flexibility and complexity of its investments and established a robust ecosystem of strategic and global partnerships. Expanding its footprint, GIC set up offices in the world's major cities with an investment portfolio spanning over 40 countries. These advances in reserves management were not due to happenstance, but the outcome of an indomitable spirit to do right for the country's reserves. What began as a bold vision for Singapore's financial security continues to live in GIC today, tomorrow, and for generations to come. Thinking long-term is at the core of GIC's philosophy. This long-term orientation has allowed GIC to weather global crises with confidence.
When GIC started 40 years ago, Dr. Goh Keng Swee, of course, who had a bold vision to start GIC, had an insight that the reserves of Singapore, which are managed by the MAS, might be better handled by another body which could take a long-term view of the reserves and invest for the long term. So that was really the genesis of the whole idea of GIC.
But it was not long after its inception that GIC faced its first baptism of fire.
It so happened that on Black Monday, I was in Sydney, Australia, attending a central bankers meeting. That enabled me to take, shall we say, a detached view of the turmoil. It's very easy for people to get excited about the happenings of the moment. It was quite a dramatic event, and I think what pleased me particularly was that we did not lose our nerve.
The bursting of the dot-com bubble. You see, that coincided with the trauma of 9/11. The stock market did fall very sharply by almost 40%. And that was when the long-term orientation of the GIC under risk capacity enabled us not to panic. We were able to maintain our composure, to accept the losses in the short term, and in fact to take advantage of that moment to build up our exposure, which we did. Particularly in various parts of Asia, we were able to say, this will pass, and to look for where the new opportunities were.
About 2003, 2004, at the time I was the Deputy Secretary at the Ministry of Finance. And we began to think hard about the larger role of the reserves, that it was not just a rainy day fund that GIC was managing, that it was increasingly becoming a source of regular income for the government's expenditures. In other words, there was an endowment element to this. And so we did a review, and to serve successfully as an endowment fund, you need to make sure that the spending rule is prudent, that you do not spend on a long-term basis more than what the endowment earns by way of returns, because you want the endowment to grow over time, because your spending needs will also grow over time. The subsequent expression in the NIRC framework, Net Investment Return Contribution Framework, the timing was fortuitous, because right at the end of that period, we went into the global financial crisis, 2008, 2009.
We didn't realize when we introduced this new framework, allowing the government to spend on the basis of expected long-term returns, how useful it would be in the GFC, because we introduced it in 2009 just in time. And it means that in crisis, when tax receipts go down because of a recession, the government still has this steady flow of income coming out of reserves. Extremely useful. Drawing on our reserves for the first time, we were able to do it because we had the confidence, and the markets had the confidence in our AAA rating.
When I first joined GIC, we had three separate investment companies, one looking after public markets, one after private markets, and one after real estate. There are certain expertise, in public markets which could be useful for people in private markets, and there are certain expertise in the private markets which would be useful for people in public markets. Hence, this idea of we ought to move towards one GIC, looking at total GIC performance. Collaboration became a major behavior. So the whole idea of one GIC was really a pursuit of excellence. When we are dealing with the future, when we are dealing with uncertainty, the way that you have to deal with this situation is to concentrate on culture. It's an approach people take. It's values that they carry.
In the mid-2000s, GIC was very intentional in developing an attractive employee value proposition and strong culture, to recruit and retain talent globally, to give them a good place to work, to find fulfillment, and to flourish. We recruited locally good people who could help us build these networks and who understood our mission as well. We knew we needed a set of people with diverse talents to make a good team.
Whether it's during the Asian financial crisis, the global financial crisis, or the COVID-19 crisis, having a GIC team who is in the market, who understands market dynamics, turned out to be very valuable because we got valuable inputs from GIC on how the world was looking at the crisis, whether it was how they were looking at the COVID-19 pandemic itself, or looking at the actions of other central banks, or looking at the actions of other governments. And that allowed us to have a fuller assessment of what we need to do, what our options were, and how we could rally players in this effort.
COVID-19 will not be the last crisis we face. Singapore will always be a little red dot in a dangerous and unpredictable world. And the reserves gives us the confidence to forge ahead, knowing that we will have the ability to deal with any emergencies that may come our way. All this is made possible because of the GIC's important role as steward of the national reserves.
We are actually well positioned for this new environment that we've entered into. Our long-term orientation is still a major advantage that the GIC has. The fact that we are present in all the asset classes and sectors and geographies gives us an advantage in this more complex environment. But our partnerships are also a real source of advantage in the years to come. We've built up over 40 years partnerships with the best in the world. And that's come about because GIC itself is viewed as a fair and professional partner and one that invests with integrity. That's the reputation that GIC has. And we have to give credit to the successive leaderships of the GIC at many different levels for having developed that reputation that makes us now a sought-after partner. Ultimately, our biggest strength in this more challenging environment will be the strength of our bench, our people. And that's about hiring the best, retaining them as much as possible, but it's also about a learning culture that GIC has become distinctive for. Everyone has to keep developing their expertise.
Going forward, GIC has to evolve to invest in new areas, finding new opportunities, new asset classes, new markets, in tandem with the capabilities that we have built up. First, in terms of scale, we need to be able to scale up our operations to deploy significant amount of capital into the markets. Second is in terms of scope. We need to have wider scope of deploying our capital, getting into areas, new asset classes where we can earn higher return than from traditional markets. And finally, it would be in terms of depth, that we need to build up our capabilities into the different areas where we could get higher return, and to do it well with the right capabilities. GIC's primary responsibility is for Singaporeans, but we have also been operating in the global markets for 40 years. So we play a role of a responsible investor in global markets. We take our capital to many investees, helping them to build their businesses, and which in turn help their communities in terms of job creation, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of business growth. We hope also through that we make a small contribution to how markets can function well and thrive together. Our goal is to help the community to be more confident. We do this as an extension of our values. We have several community programs, one of which is our Sparks and Smiles program, which offer financial assistance to students. We design into it an element of sustainability, an element of leadership, and how they can help others to sort of pay forward. We have also a program with the Purple Symphony, which is doing a great job to help community to be more confident, to be more inclusive. And with Love, GIC, which has spanned more than 100 individual initiatives, benefiting more than 20,000 people. We will continue to invest in our community and people, creating long-term value, building more confident and inclusive communities. This is who we are. We will stay true to our purpose, safeguarding Singapore's financial future for generations to come.